Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm doing the 25.10 patch rundown. So if you enjoyed content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. It once again wasn't a particularly huge patch. There were only 3 buffs and adjustment to Vi. There were a couple of nerfs. The big thing this patch though was the system changes. A lot of AP items got adjusted, which has kind of shifted the general balance of the game more towards favouring dual AP compositions, where that's like an AP jungler and a mage in the bot lane, an AP mid laner, or just more AP in the top lane. It can vary depending on compositions, but there's definitely been a buff up to a lot of these kind of picks, and as a result, certain other things will definitely change around them. We have the new mode, Brawl, which will be interesting. It's a pretty unique mode in the way it functions. Balance changes though. So the first one is Cho'Gath. This is a pretty simple one. It is a nerf towards Rupture, which is his first maxed ability in the mid lane primarily, where he is playing the AP, like heavy movement speed, kind of build and roaming around the map. They wanted to kind of keep that down slightly whilst buffing up the top lane playstyle with like the Grasp Emax, which is why they have buffed up the E incentive and the base level 1 attack speed, which is both very nice for him. I do think Grasp Cho'Gath should be in a pretty solid spot in the top lane. Whether you're building Heart still, I don't believe so. I think that is a trap a lot of people fall into. It should be viable in certain matchups, but I'd recommend trying out either Sunfire, Hollow Radiance, or maybe some other alternative builds into those full tank variations. But he should definitely be in a good spot. A pick I definitely do recommend playing in the top lane, especially with these changes, and if you're going the Emax Grasp variation. Kayn is just suffering a slight health growth reduction. It is primarily focused around the kind of balancing out the popular junglers. Kayn is one of the more performant ones, and they wanted to just take some level of power away from him. I don't think Kayn was breaking any particularly big boundaries, but he is definitely one of the better performing ones, so they've knocked him down slightly. He will be slightly weaker, still a decent pick though. I think if you can find the right spots to go, like a red Kayn and even a blue Kayn, especially if you're playing more in elite, then yeah, he should be a relatively performant champion. In the case of Lulu, this is like the 4th nerf in a row towards this champion. She's been pretty nerf resilient. She has definitely lost a lot of power though over time. I think she sits more like a low S, high A tier support. With these changes, I think she probably moves towards being more of a low A tier support. Not a pick you're going to want to play every game, but in the right spot should still definitely be a solid option. The R is having its cooldown increased from 100 to 80 to 120 to 80, and the armor growth is going to go from 4.9 to 4.6, so going to be losing some durability as the game goes on, and not going to have the ult up as consistently early on, and that will definitely matter in some of those lanes which you pair her alongside, like your Lucians, or not your Lucians, things like your Jinxes and your Aphelioses will definitely suffer a bit if you do pair her alongside those kinds of champions. Fiddlesticks is receiving a pretty hefty change here. The fear duration on Q is going down from 1.25 to 2.25 to 1.2 to 2. And the damage is going to be going from 5.95 to 9% to 4 to 6%. With the AP ratio going up by 1%, you will need 300 AP, I believe it is, to break even at that latter rank. 100 to 300 if you are maxing Q, let's say, second. And in the empowered damage is obviously going to be suffering a bit from that, but also have its AP ratio buffed up. Overall, and the W is receiving a change, is having its AP ratio go from 35 to 40%. I do think Fiddlesticks will be weaker. This is going to be a meaningful change. You're not going to get as much AP in the jungle as you, as like some of the other mages. He tends to opt into some like AP health options. Maybe if you go like Malignance with the AP on that being buffed this much, which I'll talk about pretty soon, then yeah, you might actually be able to break even a bit quicker, but definitely going to be losing some power early. The W is meaningful though. That is his main kind of like damage tool for clearing the jungle. It's really important for finding those like angles in team fights where you can get the multi-man suck. So I do think there's some power to gain there. He's definitely going to be a slight bit weaker early on into the game, but I think once you get access to the damage through the AP ratios, he should probably break even at a certain point. I think this will be slight power down, but the item buffs, which I'll talk about in the latter part of this patch, will definitely be meaningful for him. So there is a chance he actually ends up being slightly better in jungle. We'll have to see though. But support Fiddlesticks definitely going to be losing a lot of power here. The fear duration combined with the base damage on this ability, which is his first max, is going to be meaningful. And the Fury passive monster damage is being reduced from 155 to 135. This is obviously only a Neferi jungle nerf, not a Neferi mid nerf, who is relatively performant, still in mid to low elo. And the Neferi jungle is performant across the board. I think this will definitely tag her down slightly. Probably sits as more like a above average jungle pick now, rather than like one of the premier jungle picks. So definitely going to be doing it a bit weaker with this kind of a change. But still a pick I'd recommend trying out, especially if you are looking for a strong option at the moment. So, Senna. So this is an interesting one. This is going to cause a lot of people to probably start first timing Senna ADC. Do I think this is suddenly enough to bring it into the spotlight? No. Do I think she'll still see competitive play? Probably. Competitive players love their ADC Senna. It's a nice change, don't get me wrong. It is obviously the two crit chance per 20 stacks going from 8% to 10%. The sword drop rate is going from 8.4 to 14%, which is meaningful. I believe it is like 1 in 7 minions now, which is, a good change. It is going to enable Senna to get maybe upwards of like 10 to like 15 more souls, like especially early on into the game, and that kind of a change is going to definitely help her. Gives her a bit more AD, gonna give her a bit more range as the game goes on, and a bit more crit chance through the crit chance modifier. The Q Piercing Darkness is obviously gonna suffer a bit here because Senna supports is in a relatively fine spot at the moment, so they do need to do some level of compensation because this is just power towards all. This is power towards all of her builds, and this is power primarily towards ADC, but we'll have some level of power in support if you are last hitting minion, if you ever find yourself last hitting minions. So this is going down by 10% AP ratio, which is gonna hurt her enchanted builds, primarily like the Moonstone, Echoes of Helia, Dawncore trio of items. So Senna gonna be losing some power on the enchanted build, gonna be gaining some power on the AD heavy builds and the builds which are gonna benefit from the crit chance. Do I suddenly think this makes Senna ADC good, or like Senna support shift up quite heavily? Probably not, but it is a good change for her, especially if they are wanting to lean towards that direction. The smaller changes are huge though. These are really big. They massively help his stacking. For a champion which is already in a pretty solid spot for ADC, underperforming slightly for the solo lanes, but will do better the higher elo you go, and especially if you go into competitive where he is picked more selectively in those matchups. I do think Smolder mid is really going to benefit from these, and Smolder top akin, but Smolder ADC probably going to be used as like a three-way flex pick, especially in those like competitive environments. For solo queue though, still recommend playing Smolder ADC. Probably don't recommend playing Smolder solo lane, but it should benefit from these changes. So Smolder ADC definitely going to be set as like one of the premier options probably going into this patch. Vi is receiving a pretty hefty amount of changes as well. She is going to have her Q tap nerfed slightly. The max charge on it is going to be gaining base damage, but losing some of the bonus AD, so AD ratio. So the builds which are going to be more heavy AD are definitely going to be slightly weaker from this kind of a change. The base damage on the small charge and the bonus AD are both going down though. It's a decent amount of power to lose. You are obviously gaining that 10 on the full charge, but that isn't anywhere near going to be a compensation for the amount you are just going to be losing elsewhere. The E also had a bug where if you just led with E on Sundered Sky, you'd actually get more healing, I believe it was, and more damage than you should have, because of the way the E crit modifier worked. The R is going to have its mana cost reduced, which is very, very negligible. It doesn't really change a huge amount. But the damage is also going to be going down on this ability. I think Vi is going to be in a pretty rough spot next patch. So, probably this patch. And I probably don't really recommend her in solo queue, although if you already play her, then she should still probably be playable, just slightly weaker, or maybe even meaningfully weaker. I'm curious to see kind of what scope of power she loses from these kind of changes. Xin Zhao is having his armor growth dropped from 5 to 4.4. Xin Zhao's strength is a lot of the time his early game, and the fact that his great dueling potential. Xin Zhao being less tanky later into the game will hurt him in certain situations, especially against some of those heavy AD compositions, but a lot of the power is still going to be the strength of his ultimate, where you can just cast it and then be immune to damage outside of it. I don't suddenly think Zinzal's going to fall out the meta. He's still going to be one of my recommended premier picks in the jungle, just slightly weaker against like those AD compositions. Yumi is having her R reduced, the heal on it reduced from 35 to 65 to 30 to 40, 30 to 50 rather, which is meaningful. She's going to scale a little bit worse, although it is also going to be in effect at level 6. So Yumi just across the board going to be slightly weaker. She's in a pretty fine spot at the moment, and with certain pairings can be strong. This will just put those pairings a bit more in line with other things and generally make Yumi a bit weaker as an option. Probably a pick I just wouldn't really recommend, and I don't really recommend Yumi even when she is strong. I think she has some pretty unhealthy play patterns and habits which make it hard to like go towards other champions. But if you want to one-trick Yumi, then yeah, she should still be in a relatively good spot. The item changes. So this is the big part of this patch. Bloodletter's Cars is going to have its AP buffed, its health buffed, and the magic resist shred is going to be faster. So you are now going to get 7.5 per stack rather than the 5%. You will now stack it in 4 rotations of it rather than the 6 which it was before. And yeah, I think Bloodletter's Cars was slightly under the bar, like in the previous patch, but this patch should definitely be a pickup on like your Rumbles, on your probably your Cassiopeias. There are other champions, but I just can't think of them off the top of my head. What other Bloodletters champions are there? There's more than that. I think like maybe Mordekaiser can pick it up if there's like AP champions within the game, but like he obviously has the built-in magic pen on the E, so probably not as mandatory, but there are definitely champions which can now opt into this a bit more consistently because it is a big change towards this kind of an item. Crit Bloom is having its AP go up from 60 to 75, but the life from death heal is going to be losing 5% AP ratio. The total cost is going to be going up 150 from 2,850 to 3,000 with this kind of AP ratio buff. It is a meaningful change. It will help Phoenix Codex. It will help Crit Bloom. There is an additional Phoenix Codex in the build path as well, which is also meaningful when you are building this item. I think this item's going to be in a pretty good spot. A good comparison is obviously Void Stuff when you are picking up this item, which I believe is 90 AP and 40% Magic Pen. Might be 45%. I can't remember if they buffed it more recently. But yeah, this item will definitely be like a direct comparison, and I think this is a good change for the item. So yeah, definitely a bit more optimal into, especially if you are looking for haste within like certain champions which value it a bit more. Rocket Belt is having its AP go up by 10. The health is going down by 50. The haste is going up by 5. The build path has been changed to add a Fiendish Codex. The like full recipe cost is now going to be 300 rather than 700. The total cost is going to go up by 50. And yeah, I'd say this is a pretty big change towards the item. It is I'd say a net buff towards the item as well. The cost is pretty negligible. The build path change though is really nice for it, especially being able to access another Fiendish Codex, access a Fiendish Codex whilst building this item. And yeah, the haste, the AP, it's going to help champions which want to pick that up a bit more. Some of the champions which build this item for its health are going to suffer a slight bit, but yeah, generally this item is going to be stronger. Horizon Focus is having its AP go up from 75 to 110. That is a big jump. However, the Hypershot damage amp, which I believe was 10%, has been removed. The build path has changed from Fiendish Codex, and Flying Tone to Fiendish Codex, Blasting Wand. The full recipe cost is now 350 instead of the 600, and the total cost is 2,700. Well, has gone from 2,700 to 2,900. I believe this is a buff to the item. Probably not a large buff because the cost is going up and they are removing the damage amp, but the additional AP, the slightly better build path will definitely help it. And I believe champions like Zoe and actually just champions which didn't even really care about the and champions which now which would have built it and not really gotten the Hypershot buff are going to benefit from this change. It's a lot of AP and it's a lot of haste. You'll probably see people, champions like Gragas pick this item up, I believe. It is 25 haste on the item and yeah, a lot of AP. There are going to be other good champions, but yeah, like your Zoes, the Zerefs, and the Vel'Kozes. I imagine we'll still probably pick it up, just not aren't as tied to it as they were in the previous patch, which won't be meaningful. That might actually cause them to be slightly weaker because 10% damage amp is meaningful to almost all their abilities. Leandries is receiving a flat 10 AP ratio nerf. That's meaningful for your Rumbles, your and some of your AP, some of your Leandries rushers. Yeah, that is going to hurt the junglers who use this item to clear pretty quickly, especially early on to the game, and just because it is a strong item. And yeah, 10 AP is going to be a meaningful loss on this item, and especially when like the other competitive AP items are being buffed up as well. Lich Bane is having its AP go from 115 to 100. The recipe has changed to now include a blasting wand instead of a needlessly large rod. The total gold cost has gone down from 3,200 to 2,900 though. I mean, two of the champions actually, which I really do highlight as good options, which I'll talk about when I go like dive into the tier list slightly, are Gwen and Kale. I think both Gwen and Kale will benefit from this change, the Nash's change and the Mobadon change, which I'll cover in a moment. But yeah, definitely be on the watch out for those champions. Ludens is having its gold cost reduced by 100, which is a good change. I'm glad Ludens has been buffed. It was definitely up there as one of the weakest mage items in the game, and this is a strict buff, which is good to see. Malignant is having its AP increase from 85 to 90. This was originally a gold cost reduction, which is now interesting to see them go a different direction. The champions which like build Malignants are mostly tied to their ultimate. Things like Swains, if they opt into it, like Malphites for example, will definitely benefit from this kind of a change. Morello's is having its gold cost reduced by 100. Nice change. Probably still not going to complete it till last item, but it's nice to have the gold cost reduced by 100. Nashers, a strict 100 gold cost down. Rabadon's a strict 100 gold cost down, which is meaningful. These two items are now easier to pick up for the champions which like want them as like their spike options. As I said earlier, Kale and Gwen are definitely be on the watch out for these two champions. They will really benefit from both these changes. Sirus is having its shield change from 200 plus 20% current mana to 18% max mana, which is a nice change. Whether this ends up being buffed, because this is definitely going to be generally powered down to like 20%, I think that will probably be better long term. It's definitely weaker though now, and I mean Seraphis was like a strong item, so it makes sense to nerf this item. The champions like your Orianas and your Gragases will probably feel this if they continue to go this item. There are other champions, but those other two which come to mind. Storm Surge is having its gold cost reduced from 2,900 to 2,800, and the movement speed go up by 2%. Both these changes really nice. The gold on preemptive takedown was pretty negligible, and the movement speed on Squirrel had its use cases, but was also pretty negligible, so it's good to see a change, like just removing like not very noticeable things for just like power on the item. Storm Surge definitely going to be in a pretty strong spot. The movement speed is nice on this item, and it's a relatively cheap mage item for like a bit more burst potential. Unsealed Spellbook is having its base recharge cooldown go from 5 minutes to 4 minutes. The recharge cooldown at maximum slots is now 1.5 minutes instead of 2.5 minutes. And that is meaningful. Spellbook's in a weird spot. Honestly, this rune doesn't really feel like it fits in the game anymore. It should have probably been removed a while ago, and options like First Strike get buffed up slightly, and like just the rune generally get replaced. But this kind of a change will make it viable on like your Orns, I imagine, on maybe your Narcissus if they want to opt into it. It's a hard rune to use, and I wouldn't blame you if you still continue to not use Unsealed Spellbook. But there are definitely angles where if you can opt into it, having those additional summoner spell rotations can be nice to have. But don't overcomplicate things. I think when you do overcomplicate things, it can be meaningful to like your mental stack and like how much you can kind of do in the game. So Unsealed Spellbook, if you want to learn how to use this rune correctly, it can definitely have its use cases, but still probably a rune which is like going to be hard to use in a lot of situations. A couple of bug fixes and quality of life changes, and yeah, the skins, Stargaze of X, High Noon Yurak, and Blood Moon Rise, all very unique skins. Obviously they were added to like already pre-existing skin lines in the case of Rise and Yurak. Vex is a port over from Wild Rift, but like not a full port. I believe this is like a built up from the ground skin, and like has a different splash out, which is interesting to see. If I press controls 3, we should have a patch rundown. Nice, epic. Right, so I want to talk about the changes primarily. Most of the ones I've highlighted in pink are directly going to be affected by the mage item changes. As you can see, there's a lot of these, and that does continue throughout the roles. Like if you show jungle, mid, a lot of these champions are directly affected by the mage items. Even some of the top lane, which I haven't highlighted. I primarily originally I was highlighting like the important ones, but I just ended up highlighting a lot of generally like the ones affected. So yeah, like Cassiopeia, Kayle is definitely up there as one of the primary ones. I think Kayle is probably going to be an S+ champion next patch, so definitely a pick to watch out for. Vladimir will benefit from the Rabadon's change, for example. Kennen will benefit from the Rocket Belt change. Same goes for likes of Silas. Akali will benefit from the Rocket Belt change. Champions which don't really care as much of the health ratio. Silas will probably suffer a bit from the Rocket Belt change because he does have a health ratio on his kit, on his W. Gwen is going to be getting a lot of power this patch with some of her core items being cheaper, so I imagine she'll be bumped up to the A tier. Cho'Gath will probably be one of the premier S tier options. I do think he is going to be stronger, especially into those tank matchups with the E percentage health being buffed. Smolder might make the jump into the C tier. The buffs are pretty huge for him. In the jungle, Xin Zhao will probably still remain as an S tier option, just not the premier S tier option anymore. Neferi will probably be dropped down to the A tier. Fiddlesticks, we'll have to see kind of where the changes land for him. I wouldn't be surprised if he remains as an A tier option. King will still probably be an A tier option, just more of a low A tier option now. Vi might drop a boy down to the C tier. It'll be interesting to see. She was a pretty close to the bottom A tier champion, and this kind of a change is sizable. Obviously, Gwen is going to be definitely a lot stronger with these with the AP changes for jungle as well. Same goes for like your AP Shyvanas, your Eves, your Nidalees, stuff like that. The AP assassins, which were like your Lich Banes, and honestly, maybe like your like your Abaddons and stuff will really benefit from these changes. Karthus is another one, for example. In the mid lane, huge amount of changes with the AP items. I could definitely see a lot of things shifting. Generally, AD champions will probably be a bit weaker this patch. So like your AD assassins will probably struggle into some of your mages who have access to a bit more damage, a bit quicker into the game. Smolder will probably also be higher up in this tier as well, or in the mid lane as well. I believe I had someone highlighted who wasn't a mage, but was being like kind of adjusted with the changes, but I can't see them off the generally here. Cho'Gath will also probably linger as maybe like a low S, high A tier with his changes, so definitely another pick to watch. Kelmid will probably be bumped up to the S tier. In the bot lane role, obviously, mages will probably jump up a tier, just generally across the board. We'll see a lot of these performing quite well. Smolder also going to be buffed for the ADC role. Probably will most likely jump to the A tier. Might even compete with some of the S tier options. Senna, I'm interested to see where it lands. I think she has an issue of not having a great keystone at the moment, but maybe things like PTA and Grasp like really pick up traction, and she maybe even jumps to like the B tier. I think she'll sit as like a DC tier option though, but that can change with some of the things in this patch. And then in the support role, I think Lulu will drop a tier to the A tier. I think Fiddlesticks might drop all the way down to the A tier, and then Yuumi will probably drop down to the low end of the B tier, maybe even C tier if the R-Nerfs genuinely end up being quite sizable. Mages will also benefit here, like some of your snowbally ones like your Zoes and your LeBlancs would definitely benefit from them and probably make the jump up into the A tier. And then Senna, obviously receiving those adjustments, might remain as a high B tier pick, maybe jump up to the A tier if her like cleaver utility builds end up doing a bit better. Those are my thoughts, so thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.